Hello, ladies. Hi, how are you today? I hope you're doing well. I'm coming at you with your teacher lesson for our Bible. This is your last teacher lesson for the Bible because it's our last week of school. So you are going to wrap it up and you're going to be testing on this stuff Thursday or Friday. So I also kind of want to notice at the moment, right now, when I am recording this video, only one of you did the memory verse assignment that was assigned to you last week, 2 weeks ago, where you were supposed to look up the verses on love and assign your own memory verse. So I'm a little concerned because here we are now that we're going to be having a test and you are supposed to write out that memory verse, but I only know what one of you picked. You know who you are because you've gotten credit. For everybody else, it shows as a missing assignment in your grades. Um, so I don't want to call anybody out, but you know who you are. You were supposed to pick a Bible verse and learn it. So if you haven't done that, then that's something that you're going to need to do, or else you're going to lose points on the test because the tests are not only on the chapters but also on the memory verses. You get 3 points towards your test on that memory verse, having it written out correctly and having the correct address. So there's that. Just a little reminder note. Make sure all those assignments are done. So we're going to talk about Ruth a little bit today. I actually reread the story of Ruth, and you guys read the story of Ruth last week, week before last. I love the story of her. She's just a great example of patience and love, and the way that God rewards people who obey His commands and who have a good attitude. I mean, she had it hard. I mean, we can't deny that losing your husband and then having to go into a field of a strange person in a town that you're not even familiar with, and basically she was kind of begging. I mean, she wasn't begging, she was just picking up scraps and in a hot field all day long. And it was very dangerous for a woman to do this, and the Bible sort of alludes to this a little bit when Boaz tells all of his male servants and everybody that they had to stay away from her, because she could have been harassed and abused, because she was defenseless, this woman, and most people, and she only had her mother-in-law. She didn't have anybody to really defend her honor or to protect her, and God did. God defended her honor and protected her and kept her safe and eventually rewarded her with everything that she had lost given back to her. She got a new husband, a wealthy husband. She was able to have a family and have kids, and and then I like the part in the end when they give you the little genealogy, and it shows how, from the union of Ruth and Boaz, then eventually comes King David, and we know that eventually from King David came Jesus. So it's this big line, this big way that God works, and it's one of those things that kind of brings to light the fact that we have no idea what God's plans are. And nobody would have guessed at this time of Ruth, when you saw this woman who was a widow and she was just picking up leftover pieces of grain, stalks of grain off of the field. No one would ever have considered the fact that she was an ancestor to Jesus Christ. But God works in these ways, and He does these small little things, but God has a big plan. God knew that from Ruth and Boaz there was going to be Jesus, but nobody else knew. But we know it now. And so that's a way for us that we can see how, when God's working in your life, you don't know how far reaching, the effects of your faithfulness and goodness to God, how far it's going to go. It can go generations upon generations upon generations of people can be blessed when you make good choices. So, anyways, the book talks about how we can become kind. The story of Ruth, she exemplifies kindness and gentleness. And we are learning through these proverbs, hopefully, that there's only one way to have a really good godly character, and that is to allow the Holy Spirit to work within you and to give God license to work within you and to strive to exemplify this fruits of the Spirit and to trust and obey the Lord. So let's look at your teacher's lesson on page 137. So you have a little chart. Ruth's situation, the attitudes shown, attitudes she did not show, and the blessings she received. So in this case, what we're doing is we're really analyzing and talking about um, the way God blessed Ruth for reacting appropriately. And so we talked about that, and you guys had to do a lesson in our last lesson of some situations that we come across in our lives and how you can appropriately react to those in ways that show the fruits of the spirit. And so this is where Ruth really shined. Naomi, she was kind of sketchy, especially at the beginning of the chapter. She had a really bad attitude. I mean, she really did. She basically told her daughters-in-law, "Go away. I have nothing for you. I'm in a terrible situation. This is awful. You don't want to be with me. I can't help you." And there were a couple other times when she continued this negativity, but Ruth did not let that affect her. She stayed true and positive and kind and gentle, even when Naomi had a bad attitude. Um, so here we go. Ruth's situation. The first thing she runs into is that her husband died. Now her father-in-law dying was Naomi's problem, and Ruth, that may have affected her slightly, but it was when her husband died that really affected her. And the thing that I don't think we understand, and it's really hard for us to grasp in today's world, is that back in that time frame, it was really, 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 really difficult for a woman to survive and be fruitful and prosper if she didn't have a man. Women had very limited rights back then, and you weren't allowed to do a lot of things, and working for a living was one of those things that it was very there. You had limited amount of positions that you could do, and to support yourself. There wasn't like nowadays a woman can be single and go get a job and become very wealthy. This was not the case back then. You were very subjective to your husband, and you needed him to provide for you and to speak for you and to provide you protection. And so here we have these ladies. Now we've got these three ladies. No one's protecting them. No one's providing for them. So Naomi decides she's going to leave. Now Ruth, her husband dies, so she has lost her livelihood. Not to mention heartbreak. I mean, surely she cared for the man, so that would be sad. But not only do you deal with the heartbreak of losing someone that you loved, but now she's in a position of how is she going to survive? Who is going to provide for her? Who is going to look out for her? And oftentimes this would fall to kin. Well, here's the thing is that this is the only family she has at this point, and all of the men in the household have passed away. So the ladies are left with, okay, now what are we going to do? We have to do something. And the nice thing is that Ruth just accepts it. She doesn't lament. She's not complaining. She's not whining. Now, Ruth does a bit of complaining. I mean, Naomi does, but Ruth doesn't. And she's just steadfast and okay. And she has faith in the Lord to provide for her at that even in that very instance. So, attitude shown would be acceptance. Now, the attitudes she didn't show, she didn't rebel. She didn't get depressed. She didn't get discouraged. She didn't get bitter. All these things that could have happened. And she also didn't like rush. She took her time and made thoughtful decisions. And then how was she blessed? She was blessed with a new home with Naomi in this new town. When they left this new town, they went to Judah because they had heard that people there were more willing to help the poor. I mean, that's basically why Naomi left, was because she was going home to her hometown where she would be recognized, but also to a place where they had better charity. And this whole gleaning from a field was part of that. And that's because they were Jews, and God had told the Jews, it was one of his decrees that he made to them in the Old Testament, was that you have to let people glean off of your fields. And this was God's welfare system, so to speak. Like, you can't give people food stamps back then, but you could leave a little bit of something behind in the harvest so those people that didn't have food could go gather it. So this is why they left. They went to this place because Naomi knew, if we go there, we're not going to starve. She left home and moved to Canaan. Now, when they moved, this is a big deal. So this is the next situation. Okay, so the first situation is that she lost her husband. The second situation is that she moved to a new town. Okay, she moved to a new town and she showed commitment. So the attitude she showed here was commitment to Naomi. You are my mother-in-law, you are my family, and you can tell by the way she talks that even though she wasn't originally Jewish, she had converted because she flat out says to Naomi, your God is my God, and he will look after me. And Yahweh will look after me. And that is the Jewish Lord. So she obviously had adopted the customs of the household that she married into, which she probably wasn't born with. And she didn't want to go back to the old way. She wanted to stay with Naomi and with the Lord God that she had grown to love. So her attitude that she shows is commitment. The attitude she does not show is resentment, and she doesn't even show fear. She's not even afraid. She knows God is going to provide for her. And the blessing is that she learned that this was true. She learned to trust God, um, and she was blessed with her family. So then the next situation she has is that she had to go to the fields and work. So she had to go and work really hard, actually. This was hard work. This isn't easy work. If you think about it, like I kind of liken it to when I send my boys out in the yard to pick up sticks. That's probably the closest thing they've ever done to harvesting from a field. Um, when it's a nice day and Micah wants to mow, the kids have to go out and pick all the sticks up so that it doesn't hurt the lawnmower blade. And so you're working in the hot sun and you're bending and stooping and picking it up and bending and stooping and picking it up, and it's kind of hot and boring work. And this is the sort of thing that Ruth was doing. She was going and all the harvesters are harvesting. This is their job. They are paid by Boaz to do this, and she is just following behind and picking up whatever happened to get dropped. Um, and there's not a lot. I mean, there probably wasn't a lot. Eventually, there becomes more because Boaz actually tells them, leave more behind than you normally would because he wants to look out for her. Um, but in the beginning, it was like you were just picking up these little piddling things that whatever was dropped. So Ruth's situation, she worked hard for it. She worked in the fields. Her attitude shown here is gentleness and kindness and perseverance. She doesn't give up. She doesn't complain. She doesn't get bitter. She doesn't get angry. And she's not fearful. So, attitude's not shown, no complaining, no bitterness, no fear, no resentment. And what blessings does she receive? She gets first, initially, she gets fed. And then she gets shown favor because Boaz actually says, hey guys, you better stay away from her. And he says, leave extra food for her. And then she meets Boaz in person, and even further blessing, they end up getting married. And she gets to keep the land that belonged to her mother in law, and she gets to have babies and live a happy life and be prosperous. And I think I'm willing to bet that at that point, when she married Boaz, she no longer had to work in the field. But I wouldn't be surprised if she went out there and helped once in a while because that just seems like the kind of person that she would have been, was that she would have gone out to the fields and helped the other servants. But they don't tell us that part. But they do tell us that they got married, that they were in love, and that they had a family, which eventually led to King David and Jesus Christ. So that's your teacher lesson. I hope you filled in the blanks. And then I'm going to have you study these things, and you're going to take your last Bible test because we are almost done with the year. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.